Entrepreneurship is serious business. That's the narrative we often hear during conversations with founders, on this show especially. We're told that we need to be tough, resilient, and all the other adjectives that describe successful people who start their own ventures. But what if we weren't so serious all the time? How much fun can we have as entrepreneurs and still be successful? Kaylin Marcotte's early career wasn't particularly fun. In 2012, she was training as a management consultant at IBM and gearing up for law school in New York. But the following year, Kaylin discovered something that completely derailed her plans. Two promising young female founders who wanted to start a media company. So she quit her job and became the first employee at a digital media company called theSkimm. Yes, that theSkimm, whose investors now include Google Ventures, RRE Ventures, Disney, and more. Throughout her time at theSkimm, Kaylin's days were pretty demanding, and she often played with jigsaw puzzles at home to unwind. She loved them, and she got really into them. But she didn't always love the stock imagery she was putting together. There were lots of cottages, lakes, the kinds of puzzles your grandmother might give you. So in 2019, she founded JIGGY. It's a direct-to-consumer company creating jigsaw puzzles that actually look pretty cool. But beyond the appealing aesthetic of its products, JIGGY's very existence is a reminder of how important it is to have fun throughout the entrepreneurial journey. This week, I spoke with Kaylin about how she went from getting hired as theSkimm's first employee to becoming the founder and CEO of JIGGY. What were her biggest learnings as she transitioned from working at a media company to manufacturing a physical product? What was it like to create a business out of her hobby? And how do we make fun a core part of the entrepreneurial experience? I'm Catherine Vasilopoulos, and this is And So She Left, the podcast about incredible women entrepreneurs and the wisdom they gained beyond the corporate world. When she left college as a political science and economics major, Kaylin wasn't quite sure where she wanted to go. She was considering a career in law and soon found herself walking through the door at IBM. As Kaylin remembers, it was about as corporate as it gets.
Management consulting was attractive to me in that I felt it was analytical, and I really liked the idea of working with clients and being on a project basis. And so I started in IBM's management consulting program, which was 2 years, and you rotate every 6 months to a different client, different project. So a really good kind of boot camp entry to, thinking strategically and analytically. And so I ended up staying with IBM in their consulting program for a couple of years until I met two young co-founders and decided to make my first jump into the startup world.
Okay, so you went from a very stiffer corporate structure to then going into a more of a startup environment, which we know is extremely different and it's sometimes chaotic. So tell me more about that kind of environment.
Yeah, that was definitely the biggest initial kind of culture shock of the lack of structure, and I think also the never on, never off, like where just work and life blend together so fluidly. And so I met two young female co-founders who were starting a media company called theSkimm. It was a daily email newsletter. The idea was to reconnect millennial women with current events and the news and serve everything you need to know about the top stories of the day in an email newsletter. And so I joined them when they raised a seed round of funding in the end of 2013. And being the first employee is such a unique experience to really see from the ground floor. I remember my first day, it was just the two of them and they hadn't got an office yet. So it was, great. Let's talk, the highest level, biggest picture, our goals and strategy for the year. And then let's build office furniture together and get this place set up so that, the three of us can work together.
You were literally building the company with the furniture too.
Completely.
Do you remember what it was like to be in that space where you have all these new ideas? Everything is just brand new. Like, what was your role exactly? How would you describe that?
Yeah, that was another kind of adjustment to the talk about lack of structure. I think the first 10 to 15 employees, like we didn't even really have titles. It was like, you're an editorial skimmer or you're a marketing skimmer. And so I guess my role on paper was around marketing. And so, there was immediately a lot of traction and kind of grassroots community just growing around the brand organically. People felt very connected to this voice and tone and personality behind the newsletter. And so, kind of building out an ambassador program and doing a lot of content marketing. And we moved into offline events, social media. And so all of that. And then outside of my specific scope, but what ended up being on my plate, just I think by virtue of being there first, was a lot of kind of the internal stuff. So team building and, welcoming each new employee. And so kind of onboarding and kind of almost chief of staff type role as well, just as the team was growing so quickly.
Well, as you're talking, I'm listening to every single thing that you had to do, that you learned. And to me, it's so obvious to me that you just got all the skills. You were getting ready for the next chapter. I mean, that's what it was.
100%. I think working at a small, coming from such a corporate environment, I think taking the jump, from IBM to being a founder would have been so drastic, but spending those few years at theSkimm working for two founders so closely, it kind of demystified, what starting a company took and what those early days are like. And so I think that was such a pivotal stepping stone. I don't know where I would be if I hadn't seen that so intimately.
I find it interesting because with all the guests that we've had on our show so far, many of them have said it's so important to get that corporate experience before becoming your own boss. But in your case, you have that added bonus of being in like not just corporate, but then moving to startup and then moving into entrepreneurial, which means that you're fully formed way before you're ready to start. And that's, I find, is you're lucky to have that experience. Tell me about your obsession or your interest with puzzles. I want to hear more about that.
So it started very organically when I was at theSkimm in those early days that, as I said, were amazing and also crazy. And, I definitely at different times was reaching just that point of burnout and, on one screen or another all day long from phone to computer. And then I'd come home and want to unwind. And so turn on the TV and I was like, wait, this is more of the same. This doesn't actually feel relaxing. Everyone was talking about, I think, Headspace and Calm, and it had just come out. Everyone was talking about meditation, and I tried meditating and yoga. And I don't know, it didn't really stick. And I had done puzzles as a kid, but, not really for my adult life. I'd kind of forgotten about them. But I had one lying around and I pulled it out and it just clicked immediately for me that this was my ritual and it was relaxing and meditative. But I still, felt like I was working towards something and just that little dopamine hit every time I got the pieces to fit. And so I just fell in love with jigsaw puzzles and I started doing about 1,000-piece puzzle every week. And
1,000 piece?
Yeah. Yeah. Each night after dinner became my kind of just a habitual turn on music or an audiobook and make either, depending on the night, wine or tea and sit down and just kind of unwind before bed with my puzzle. And so all the ones I could find though were, I felt kind of outdated, kind of cheesy stock photography of animals or cottages or whatever it was. And I just started thinking, what would my dream puzzle be? How could I improve this experience? And the first thing that came to me was, the design itself, of course, the art. So how would this experience be different if this was, a beautiful piece of an illustrative scene or photography or an abstract? And so I really wanted to kind of reinvent the classic puzzle in a much more elevated kind of design and art forward way.
What did you learn from solving the mystery of the puzzle?
I actually, when I was launching the company, I wrote a blog post of all of my life lessons that I felt I had, puzzling had taught me. And, a couple of them, I think especially in such an overly stimulated kind of instant gratification world, like there are no shortcuts to a jigsaw puzzle. And just that patience and, delayed gratification, and that, you pour out these pieces and it looks like, a mess on the table, and you slowly start sorting through. And so really just, I think it was so many things in life can be taken one piece at a time. And sometimes you can look at the shape or look at the pattern and you can tell what fits where. And sometimes you just have to try a bunch of pieces and see what fits. And so, there were a lot of life lessons and just kind of slowing down and focusing on the task in front of me.
I remember during the pandemic, there were a lot of moments where I had to make a puzzle. There was nothing else to do. And I remember that the life lesson was, you have to start with the foundation, the frame and the corners. And then there was always that one piece that you're convinced belongs somewhere, and you're trying and you're trying to push it and it doesn't belong there. And you have to maybe flip it 90 degrees or look at it differently at one point. And then you realize, oh no, it goes in the other place,
right,
in another part of the puzzle. And you're like, that's how life is. Sometimes you're really trying to make something fit somewhere and it just doesn't. Tell me about what we call here at the show, your "and so she left" moment, which is the moment where you realized, I'm going to leave what I'm currently doing to start my own business. Tell me about that process.
Yeah, that was kind of a slow roll, I would say. I had the idea. I found it the other day. I started a folder on my phone of photos, called potential puzzle art back in 2016. And I didn't launch JIGGY until 2019. So there were, years in there that I was still really enjoying my work at theSkimm. This idea was in the back of my mind. I was like, I think there's something there. And then over that time, I was also just kind of paying attention to some trends I was seeing. And there was that adult coloring book fad. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Maybe there's an appetite for something like this. And then, Pinterest and DIY projects and crafting. And
right.
I just, started, I think, getting more and more confidence that not only was this just my cute little hobby that I wanted to spend more time on, but that there might actually be some business potential here. And then finally in 2018, I, was coming up on 4 years at theSkimm, and the company had just changed, so incredibly, seeing it from 0 employees to 80. And, we'd done 2 more rounds of funding since I was there. So I just felt really good about the work that I'd put into this company. And I started really getting that itch. I was like, all right, I could stay here forever and keep building these founders, dream and vision, but this idea won't go away and it keeps coming up. And I, along the way, had a different business idea and just, never got around to it. And then I saw it on Instagram. Somebody else was doing it. And I just sat there and I was like, you know what? If 6 months from now, 12 months from now, I see an artsy, cool, elevated, beautiful puzzle company or advertising on Instagram, I'm going to freak out and it has to be me to do this. And so I decided to leave and start navigating through the manufacturing world and figuring out how to make my dream puzzle.
I like what you said there, that you need some time to develop the confidence. But along the way, you're seeing other people fill up that space on the market. And you're like, I need to hurry up and get in on this too. So you have an idea that's simmering, on the one hand, you have your folder on your phone, but on the other hand, time's going by. And so you have to make that decision and, strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah.
What's your company's name?
It is called JIGGY, Jiggy Puzzles. So I wanted, some kind of fun play on jigsaw where once you knew what it was, it made total sense and connected, but was playful. I had a whole Word doc of brainstorms and thesaurusing different things. And finally I was on a walk with a friend and I was like, I don't know, something playful, fun, like a riff on jigsaw, JIGGY, and it just came out. And I was like, wait, I think that was it.
I want to talk about the fun component of what you're doing right now. Why is it important for you to have fun in this job? And why is it important for you to develop this for people?
I think about it a lot. On the one side, it's the impact I want to have and what I want to bring to our community. And I think, again, just coming back to what puzzles did for me, there's so much to be serious about, and rightfully so, things in the world and impact in your career and work and building the family you wanted. There's just so much to be very intentional and thoughtful and serious about. But I think, sometimes that can come at the expense of just keeping some lighthearted joy. And as we grow up, I think we lose play a lot. And my family, and now my husband, and we have our first child, just huge game night and board game family. And I think the idea of carving out time to just have such a different energy and just enjoy play is really important. And for me personally, it's hard. It's hard starting a business. It's hard bootstrapping it and being a female founder and a first-time founder and all of these things. There are a lot of challenges that come with it, but I've had so many moments where I'm just like, you know what? I get to work with incredible artists and make puzzles. Like, if I'm not having fun with this, what's the point?
I mean, that is probably the mission of your company. It's not just I make puzzles with nice art. It's the overarching theme of I help bring people together and create playtime for people to build memories together. And I'd love to hear more about, you already had a lot of experience coming into this because you were in a previous startup, but what were your own challenges in building your brand and building a company from the ground up?
A million challenges, but I'd say, a couple different categories or challenges maybe. So first, just starting the business, once you have the name and getting the domain and setting up all the infrastructure, and there's plenty of guides and lists and checklists to get the business propped up. But then for me, what was brand new coming from theSkimm, which is all digital, is, the physical product world. So I had a pretty clear idea of the product and what I wanted it to look like and some of the materials to use, but how to translate that vision into CAD ready print files for a factory, I was clueless on. And so, getting just each step of the way, just self-teaching, having no ego about asking a million questions. I found a lot of just part-time kind of project-based contractor help, getting the physical product made, imported, then I fulfilled out of my living room for a bit, but that was quickly unsustainable. So finding a fulfillment center, warehousing and logistics and customer service issues. And so that whole side of the physical product world was brand new, and a million, lessons learned of the first production run. Some of the dimensions were off and the puzzle wouldn't fit in the jar.
Oh no.
So just learning the hard way on that, not working with one of our vendors, their email got hacked and I wired the whole invoice to tie hackers. Call the vendor when you're wiring, confirm over the phone. Of course, I didn't even think to do that. So again, just raise your hand and find the people who do know the answers and have done it before, and don't be scared to ask for help.
Yeah. And that goes back to your whole team building skill set, is that you had to build your own team from scratch, as I could understand. So what was it like for you moving from a worker mentality to then a founder mentality? Tell me more about that.
One, just, the realities of the demands on your time, and just the fact that in the beginning, certainly, if I wasn't doing it, nobody was doing it. And so managing my energy when there was always more to do, there was never, sometimes as an employee, I think you get a task, you get a project, you have your to-do list, you make your way through it, and you get to close your computer. And as a founder, it's never done. And there's always more you could be doing. And even if that to-do list is done, what's next? How do I keep pushing forward, keep growing, get ahead of every predictable surprise, that's going to happen. So one, that kind of discipline to still carve out time, to still have any kind of balance to protect my energy, that was really important. And to learn to delegate, again, I think once everything has been on your plate, you're like, all right, well, I can just keep doing it this way. It's more time to explain it to somebody. But it was actually the theSkimm founders, when I was working for them, that said your role as a founder when you're trying to scale is to replace and fire yourself from every task that is not the absolute highest, best use of your time. So,
I love that. Replace and fire yourself.
Yes. Find the best person for the job, then fire yourself from that job. That's a big reframe on what will actually, be in the best interest of the company and growth, to fire yourself continuously.
Oh my God, that's hysterical. It's true. You get to a point where you can't do everything. You have to absolutely tell someone else, okay, you need to take this on. Quickly, I would love to hear more about your experience on Shark Tank.
Yeah, it turns out about a third of the companies that go on Shark Tank are scouted by the producers. So they reached out, said they had found me on Instagram, I think. So that only kind of gets you past the first open casting. You still have to do your pitch video and everything. So went through all the steps and ended up recording, and it aired in 2021. So it was still really much in the pandemic, and they had built this whole bubble environment and recreated the set. But it was such a cool way to not only, be able to share my story and the JIGGY story, and for me to really think about some of the big questions that I knew they were going to ask. I was about a year in business and had no investors, no co-founders or employees. And so I was kind of just sprinting to keep up. And so the process of preparing for the show was actually really cool to, kind of pie in the sky ideas like, what would I do with, an investment and an infusion of capital? What is the 5-year vision? And so it was really fun to prepare and just to think big. And then, the actual filming was really cool because what you don't see is you're in there for about an hour on average. And so you actually get into, a real dialogue, and you have a lot more time to discuss everything and their whole kind of conversations and threads and questions. And so there's a lot more time you have to dig into everything. I ended up getting an offer from Mark Cuban, who was my dream shark going in. So I was so grateful for that. But whether you come out of it with a deal or not, to get the shark's input and advice and pushback and feedback and get that platform and that level of exposure is kind of once in a lifetime, and has just catapulted so many brands to a different level.
Yes. How did it impact JIGGY's future?
Oh, it was amazing. The Shark Tank audience is so supportive and really just rooting for you. We run on Shopify, so I was sitting on Shopify, just refresh and watching the immediate traffic and sales and all the nice notes and feedback and likes on social media and comments. And it got not only, was the immediate impact from the airing, but then a lot of other people watched the show, like, retail buyers for stores and potential partners. And so it actually not only helped with the direct to consumer business, but also the B2B wholesale and retail world as well.
So what was your biggest learning from the experience? Because you said that you actually talked for an hour with them, but we only see about 10 minutes of it on the air, right? So what was that like?
Yeah, I think, they definitely were really interested in the kind of the growth model and how much I wanted to focus on direct to consumer or going into retail. Because in some ways, those are completely different businesses, and the
Mm-hmm.
team you need, the personnel that you hire, the strategy around introducing new products and how many SKUs do you have and pricing models is completely different if you're selling, D2C on e-commerce, or you're really going after, the Targets and Walmarts and big box retailers. And so we talked about that and kind of what the future strategy was. We talked about, is this just a COVID fad? Is this a real sustainable business, or is this just kind of a inflated numbers because this is such a puzzle craze during the pandemic? So
Well, that's a good question. You're right. People were locked in and they needed something to do. But then after, when people go back to normal lives, is this something that will continue to grow? And have the numbers gone in any direction that you didn't expect?
no, so that was really something that, because we were able to really get ahead of it and build that ritual with our customers. So a big thing that came out of it was actually our subscription. So, we have a monthly puzzle club where you get a 500-piece puzzle every month. And so that was a way to build that ritual with our customers, which also was very organic to just me and, my founding story of doing puzzles every night and getting through, a puzzle every single week. Acquisition is important, but a vast majority of your business and revenue will end up being repeat and coming from your existing customers. And so I really wanted to make sure that we were still focusing on what our existing customers want and what will keep them engaged and coming back. And let's introduce new products. So a big differentiator is that each of our puzzles is artwork by a female artist. And to that end, I thought, what if this was actually something you want to keep and frame? And so we include puzzle glue with the puzzle so you can preserve it once it's done. And then we launched frame pairings so you can actually frame it and get it on the wall. And then we started hearing, I want to do this with my family, but it's the pieces are a bit small, or 800 is a lot for my kids. And so we introduced JIGGY Junior, which is our kids line of puzzles.
Okay.
We started getting requests to do custom puzzles of, I want to turn my artwork or even my kids' artwork or this family photo.
Yeah.
So we actually found a domestic printer who can print on demand. And so we started personalized custom puzzles between building the rituals and that habit and having the subscription model, and then continuing to introduce new product and serve our customers in new ways. We were able to get ahead of it and continue to grow.
Tell me, what advice do you have for people who are thinking about jumping ship and starting their own business?
Yeah, I think, of course, it's so specific to everyone's circumstances and where they're at. But for me, I would definitely say start with what you can. Start where you are. There will come a moment that you have to make the leap. But I think especially if it's a brand or a consumer-facing business, there are ways to start building an audience, launch a website and start collecting email addresses to build up your email list. Make sure you get the Instagram and TikTok handles to start the social accounts, and start putting up content and seeing what the feedback is, and start building an audience, even a year before launch day. And ultimately, I bootstrapped, and I think that's much more viable path than it seems sometimes, to be generating revenue pretty quickly and then run on cash flow and reinvest and build the business to a point where it's ready for a bigger infusion. And I think really on the brand building, I've, from my SKIM experience and brought it through to JIGGY, I'm such a fan of just really kind of transparent community building with your customers. As I mentioned, with our product extensions of the JIGGY Junior line and frames, it all came from what our customers were asking for. So really keeping that dialogue open and keeping close to your community and your customers.
Thank you so much to Kaylin Marcotte. You can learn more about JIGGY through the link in the episode description. If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe to And So She Left wherever you listen. Your feedback helps us to better serve current listeners and reach new ones. Head over to andsosheleft.com for full episodes, transcripts, an application form to be on the show, a list of upcoming guests, and more. And So She Left is made by Cansulta and Ethan Lee. Cansulta connects entrepreneurs and leaders with a global roster of over 150 pre-vetted consultants and experts like Ethan and I, who can help organizations in any business area, from HR to finance to sales and marketing, and even innovation and product design. We'll be back next Wednesday with a new episode. Our music is by Correspondence and Chris Zabriskie, edited for your enjoyment. You can find a list of all the songs you heard here in the episode notes. I'm Catherine Vasilopoulos, and thanks for listening.